Repeal and replace became collapse and die overnight. Where do Republicans go now? The president's response to the surprise announcement? Not on me. And the mystery guest in Trump Tower, a mystery no more. This is the State of America tonight.
The effort to repeal and immediately replace the failures of Obamacare will not be successful.
When we finally get a chance to repeal and replace, they don't take advantage of it, so that's disappointing.
I'm worried that Obamacare will stand and the law will continue to collapse.
President Trump and I fully support the bill that just repeals Obamacare.
Nobody knew that health care could be so complicated.
It's another week, another delayed vote, more uncertainty.
We're not going to stop fighting until we get it done.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin, live in New York. To our viewers watching around the world, this is State of America tonight. If you listened to President Trump Monday afternoon, everything was going just fine with his number one legislative priority, health care reform.
And I will tell you, it's a very, very hard time they're having with the Obamacare situation. So we're going to get that done, and I think we're going to surprise a lot of people, but they're pushing very hard. The Republican senators are great people, but they have a lot of different states. Some states need this, some states need that, but we're getting it together, and it's going to happen.
All right, we're going to interrupt and go straight over to Capitol Hill. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, speaking right now on the state of health care.
Sometime in the near future, we'll have a vote on repealing Obamacare, essentially the same vote that we had in 2015. I would remind everyone that in that proposal, there's a two-year delay, which would give us the opportunity to work out a complete replacement on a bipartisan basis with our Democratic friends. So that's a vote I think we're very likely to have in the very near future.
We got a sense of what the future might look like if we are unsuccessful in repealing and replacing Obamacare. We saw for the second time in a few days Democratic senators coming to the floor asking for tens of billions of dollars in tax dollars for insurance company bailouts. No reform, no change in the status quo. And after 7 years, I think we can safely conclude that the structure of Obamacare is a failed experiment. That's why we want to change the structure of the healthcare delivery system as we stabilize markets, protect people from premium increases and pre-existing condition exclusions. We're going to continue down that road because the alternative, I fear, is going to be a Democratic effort strictly to bail out insurance companies with no reform whatsoever.
After 7 years of Obamacare, the American public knows what they have. They have fewer choices. They have higher premiums and less control over their own health care. A number of years ago, I voted to do a repeal of the Obama health care law. I am ready to make that complete repeal vote again. But, of course, that's not enough. The people of Wyoming want more than that. They want to be able to buy the insurance that they want that works right for them, not what the federal government, Washington, D.C., says they have to buy. So I'm ready to vote to repeal. But we need a medical system not just as good as it was before Obamacare was passed, but we need a medical system and a health care system in this country even better than that.
All right, so you're listening to top Republicans in the Senate basically saying, we're going to try to figure something out from here, and here is why. 2 final no votes on the revised Republican Senate health care plan emerged. That meant basically the bill was dead. The bill collapsed. That happened just overnight. And Republicans essentially this morning, they gave up trying. Dana Bash spoke with one Republican senator who offered this take on the whole thing.
This Republican senator also noted, it just shows you what our guys think of Trump. Can you imagine them doing this to another president?
So, all said and done, case closed, moving on now? Wrong. This is Washington, people. Have you watched this show at all? It is never that easy. Well, now Republicans, as they were trying to lay out there in a very confusing way, they want to try a new idea on for size. Actually, it's quite an old idea. So let's call it retro.
In the coming days, the Senate will take up and vote on a repeal of Obamacare combined with a stable 2-year transition period as we work toward patient-centered health care. A majority of the Senate voted to pass the same repeal legislation back in 2015. President Obama vetoed it then. President Trump will sign it now.
So now the plan is to resurrect a 2015 bill that basically wiped out almost all of Obamacare and left in its place a timetable to figuring out later what to do. Worth noting here, that is not an idea President Trump supported when he took office.
We're going to do it simultaneously. It'll be just fine. We're not going to have like a 2-day period, and we're not going to have a 2-year period where there's nothing. It will be repealed and replaced. Because Obamacare has to be replaced. And we will do it, and we will do it very, very quickly. My first day in office, I'm going to ask Congress to put a bill on my desk getting rid of this disastrous law and replacing it with reforms that expand choice, freedom, affordability.
But now it appears he's all in.
President Trump and I fully support the majority leader's decision to move forward with a bill that just repeals Obamacare and gives Congress time, as the president said, to work on a new health care plan that will start with a clean slate.
So he's all in, but maybe with a caveat, as the president lays out today. Don't look at him if things fall apart.
I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it. We'll let Obamacare fail, and then the Democrats are going to come to us.
We'll get to that in a little bit. Even before the president said that, the top Democrat in the Senate announced they're ready to work together, under certain conditions, of course.
Republicans don't need to wreak havoc on our health care system first in order to get Democrats to the table. We're ready to sit down right now. If Republicans abandon cuts to Medicaid, abandon huge tax breaks for the wealthy, and agree to go through the regular order, through the committees, with hearings, onto the floor, with time for amendments. That's how we perfect legislation here.
But forget bipartisanship, folks. This whole thing might be over before it begins. At least 3 Republican senators already say they're a no. Remember the math? It's tight. They can't lose it. They really have no margin of error. I'm not going to get into it again. Well, it sounds like there's the 3 that are no's, and there are even more with reservations.
But if it is a bill that simply repeals, I believe that will add to more uncertainty and the potential for, Ohioans to pay even higher premiums, higher deductibles.
So while that chaos ensues, let's talk about the other chaos in Washington. The meeting at the height of the campaign where Donald Trump Jr. met with a Russian attorney promising dirt, of course, provided by the Russian government on Hillary Clinton. Well, CNN has now learned the identity of the previously unknown 8th person in the room on that day. He's a senior vice president at the company founded by the Russian oligarch whose son initiated the meeting. You following me here? Pam Brown, she spoke with the mystery man's attorney.
When I asked him why he was at that meeting at Trump Tower last June, he said that initially he thought he would be the translator for the Russian attorney. And so that is why he went, because he speaks fluent Russian. But when he got there, he realized that the Russian attorney had brought her own translator. And so there have been a lot of questions surrounding this mystery 8th person.
And still a lot of questions remaining. There are also now a lot of questions surrounding the president's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner and his role in that same meeting. New concerns from inside the White House that Kushner could get his security clearance ripped away. Right now, he has a temporary clearance, giving him access to some of the nation's most sensitive secrets. For the first time, there is now, at least they're saying, fear among White House staff. The fallout from that meeting could sink his chance of being able to get his permanent clearance. House Democrats say that is exactly what they want to see happen.
The fact that they are out there, the fact that the meeting with the Russians, with Trump Jr. was public and acknowledged by all those involved, I think is enough of a cloud to raise. At some point in time, maybe this gets cleared up. But in the meantime, they're involved with extraordinarily high level of information that they should not be able to have. And
maybe something the president should not be able to have: any headwear at all, ever, especially a cowboy hat. He donned the Western favorite at a White House event Monday, touting products made right here in the great US of A. We all know every president has to wear multiple hats on the job. I will leave you to guess which one that cowboy hat represents. If you thought that cowboy hat didn't look like such a good fit, how about a bunch of U.S. senators in flip-flops? And by that, I mean flip-flopping on their past positions on health care. Forget fashion. Let's talk policy. The great debate on how it collapsed, who's to blame, and what the heck they're going to do about it now. The panel is here.
Thank you for listening to the CNN podcast. In order to better serve you, we are conducting a short survey. To help us, please go to cnn.com/podcast survey. And to get more podcasts from us, just search CNN in iTunes or your favorite podcast app.
7 years of promises, countless town halls, millions of dollars spent on ads, all with one goal in mind for Republicans, to repeal and replace Obamacare. But the dream seemed to die, at least a little death last night, or at least turned into something of a nightmare for the Republicans in charge. The panel tonight. Richard Socarides is here. He's a former advisor to President Bill Clinton, a writer for The New Yorker. Lonnie Chen is a research fellow at the Hoover Institution and is the former policy director for Republican Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. Tim Miller was communications director for Republican Jeb Bush's presidential campaign, now a partner at Definers Public Affairs. John Phillips is a CNN political commentator, talk radio host, and a political columnist for the Orange County Register. All right, friends, let's get to it. Lonnie. Now we're back to what's old is new once again. Welcome to Washington. So now we're back to repeal now, replace later. If this was a winning idea, why wasn't this the first route that they took?
Well, exactly, Kate, precisely because it's not a winning idea. The notion of doing repeal now and leaving it hanging out there in the hope that there might be something that they might be able to get done, I think would be a disastrous policy proposition, a disastrous political proposition, and that's precisely why Republicans did not end up walking down this road in the first place. It seems to me that, unfortunately, Republicans may be out of options for now unless they're willing to go to some approaches that people have previously said that they don't want to be for. Things, for example, like just looking at opening up greater flexibility for states on health care, maybe doing some things to stabilize the insurance markets. But aside from those options, really, they are in a very difficult place, and I think you're seeing that as the votes come in.
Absolutely. I mean, Tim, essentially what we're seeing McConnell, because he says just now, there's going to be a vote, he says, on this repeal only in the very near future. Essentially what McConnell is setting Republicans up for is to either go with the 2015 vote again with the way that they did in 2015, or flip-flop and do it very publicly on a very important issue. And many of them are very uncomfortable because things have changed. Their constituents feel differently and are telling them so from back home. Why is McConnell going about this strategy this way with his own party?
I think that what Senator McConnell wants to do is lay out that Republicans did everything they could. I think this is his thinking. Republicans did everything that we could to try to repeal Obamacare, so they can say to voters, we did everything we could. We could not get to the threshold that we needed, and now we need essentially more Republican senators in 2018 to ensure that happens. I think that's the strategy. The problem with that, as I see it, is less with McConnell's caucus and more with the fact that there's no leadership from the White House. Usually if a new president comes in, the first major policy initiative is something that they garnered support for on the campaign trail. Well, while Donald Trump said he was for repealing Obamacare, he also said he was for protecting Medicaid, and he didn't really put out a real repeal and replace plan. So there was no framework for support, and that's allowing a lot of folks to create problems for him. And I'm not sure what the solution is.
Yeah, John, in the vacuum, in the absence of them moving forward quickly, the president's reaction this afternoon, it killed me, man. That's the only way I can say it. He says, he's basically like, repeal it, replace it, let it fail. And then the kicker is, it's not on me. Republicans are not going to own it. Is he the one that gets to decide that?
Well, Kate, politics is all about the art of the possible, and sometimes that art is abstract art. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. Republicans ran on repealing Obamacare in 2010 very successfully. They ran on it in 2014 in those midterm elections very successfully. Of course, they passed the repeal bill many times. It was vetoed by the president. We now have a president that would sign that, so that would be moving the ball forward in some capacity. But politics also doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think a lot of these Republican holdouts have to ask themselves, what is the alternative if we don't take this half a loaf? Is this bill perfect? No. Is this bill way too complicated? Yes. Are there a million problems? Yes. But is it better than what we have now? And is it better than what the alternative will be in the future? A majority of House Democrats now support single-payer health care. If suddenly Obamacare collapses, which is what we're on the road to right now, Democrats aren't going to admit that it's a failure. They're going to say, we need more money. Let's pass more subsidies. Let's put more taxes on the books.
Democrats dangle out there the single-payer boogeyman. That's going to get him in line? I mean, it hasn't gotten him in line yet, John. I mean, seriously. Richard, you have to weigh in on this, though. This line from President Trump, because I venture to guess, I don't think the president can be the one that's the decider-in-chief on this one point, that if Obamacare fails and if this whole effort fails, we're not going to own it. Republicans are not going to own it. Are Democrats going to allow that?
Well, I hate to break it to him, but when you control the entire government, all three branches of government, the White House and Congress, and you campaign on this effort to repeal and replace Obamacare, there's one person who's going to own it, and that's going to be President Donald Trump. And no matter what he says about it, say that again?
Do you think he realizes that?
I do. I think he's in denial. And now they're on this kamikaze mission to try to get something through. And McConnell's effort to do repeal alone without replace is a crazy idea, because forcing Republicans to vote for that is only going to hurt them in the ballot box.
Lonnie.
I'm not sure that's true, Kate.
Okay,
as
go ahead,
crazy
Tim.
as it might sound. Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I think that sure, with certain voters, Donald Trump is going to own it if Obamacare collapses. But, you know, if we learned anything from 2016, we're a polarized country. There are huge swaths of the country that are going to walk in line for Donald Trump no matter what happens, and they're going to buy what he's selling. And I think that, you know, they all thought that we were going to build a wall and that we were going to protect Medicaid and repeal Obamacare in 2016. I don't see why anything will be different on that in 2018.
But you're already seeing in the polling now how much he's paying for this and how much he's paying with it across the board. I mean, he is the most unpopular president at this point in his term in the history of polling. And health care is dragging that down.
Well,
he was also the most unpopular nominee to become president.
Tim,
and he also lost the election by 3 million votes.
No bitterness whatsoever in his voice. Guys, Lonnie, I want to get you on this one thing, because Rand Paul, he wants repeal, full repeal. He wants to throw it out. That's the way where Rand Paul stands. He was never going to get to yes. Rand Paul makes a very good point, though, when he says, if you voted for repeal in 2015 and you're not going to vote for it now, you need to go home and you need to explain that to your constituents, why that is. Is that going to be, how hard is that going to be for folks? Because that's where we are right now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a fair point. I think if someone voted for repeal in 2015, the only thing they can argue if they're going to change their vote now is that the circumstances have somehow changed. This is as old as time. People say this in politics all the time, but it is the case. It's a very difficult position for these people to be in. The thing that I don't get about Rand Paul's position is that the bill that he just passed on, the bill that he just said he wasn't going to support, actually repeals more of Obamacare than the 2015 repeal bill that he seems to love so much. So it's just not clear to me why it is we are where we are. It's a bizarro world we live in, Kate, and I think we're seeing that play out before our eyes.
I get my favorite tagline to break. Who knew healthcare would be so complicated? Stand by, guys. Coming up, Russia says it's close to getting its diplomatic compounds back, the ones President Obama took away as punishment for meddling in the 2016 election. What did they do to earn them back? And is Congress on board? That's next.
Hi, I'm Michael Wood, host of TNT's Will podcast, the official companion podcast of TNT's new series, Will, the story of young William Shakespeare. Every Tuesday, join me for an exclusive in-depth episode discussion with the show's executive producers, Craig Pearce and Shekhar Kapoor. We'll pass fact from fiction in Shakespeare's backstory and reveal the hidden details that fans may have missed on first viewing. It's a true behind-the-scenes look from an insider's perspective. TNT's Will podcast debuts July the 11th. Subscribe now with Apple Podcasts or on your favorite app.
Almost. That was Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister just yesterday, optimistic they will soon be getting back the keys to their U.S. compounds, the ones that the Obama administration locked up in retaliation for Russian meddling in the U.S. election. Locked up is actually the state of play, oddly enough, also for Russia's sanctions that are under consideration in the House of Representatives right now. Let's get to it. The panel's back with me. Lonnie, on the sanctions, let me start with sanctions, actually. The White House is against the sanctions because they're against the restrictions that the measure would put in place. I don't want to get into the weeds, but basically it gives Congress power over the president wanting to lift any sanctions on Russia. I sit here thinking, okay, I could see that happening from like Democrats putting that forward for a Republican president. Why is a Republican Congress doing that to a Republican president right now?
Well, there's a bipartisan consensus, Kate, that Russia meddled in our election. There's a bipartisan consensus that sanctions have to be ratcheted up on the Russian regime.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's nothing the Russians have done in the intervening time period to suggest that they would admit culpability, that they're going to do anything to help the United States on our national security priorities. So why would we go and think about giving them back compounds that, frankly, that they want so that they can have something here in the United States, a place from which they can conduct operations and potential surveillance? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So there is a bipartisan consensus, and ironically enough, it could be the case that the bill that the House and the Senate send to Donald Trump is a bill he's going to have to veto because this is not a position he agrees with.
John, the president gets a Russia sanctions bill on his desk and he vetoes it in this political environment when it will be bipartisan. I mean, do you even want to venture to guess the fallout from that?
Does it really matter if the Russians are drinking pina coladas by the pool at this compound or at the Four Seasons? I mean,
yes, if they're using
Crimea.
it to spy, if they're using the compounds to spy on Americans.
Yeah. My point is that sanctions should have been stricter back when President Obama was in office, after Crimea, after they hacked into the DNC. This was something that was kind of a publicity stunt that the Obama administration put out there after Donald Trump won the election, because I don't think anyone on Team Obama anticipating Trump winning. And, it's a big nothing burger to me.
Tim Miller, is this a nothing burger?
You're not supposed to roll your eyes on TV, but it's kind of tough. Listen to John try to point this back at the Obama administration that, while obviously was not as strong on Russia as they needed to be, at least made a modicum of an attempt, unlike this administration that is actively working with Russia, has invited them to the White House for a private Oval Office session, not to mention all the stuff they did during the campaign. This is a terrible situation. Donald Trump is literally the only person that doesn't want these sanctions, and maybe one or two people on his staff, but not the majority of his staff, not his national security team, not the House and Senate. So if you're my old boss, Reince Priebus, you're really nervous about getting a bill sent to the White House that this president, you're not sure whether he's going to veto it or sign it. Because he's the only one that's against these sanctions. It raises questions. Why exactly is that? And I think that ties into the broader, scandals engulfing the White House.
The Trump administration, Richard, the Trump administration says that they want to find ways to work with Russia on common causes. Syria is one of them. Look, in some Trump
is
way,
another one, right? That's what they suggested last
don't
week.
get me started. Do not get me started on the cybersecurity unit. Could this be a smart strategy in trying to get there?
No, not at all. I think that we have to really, as a country, dismiss any idea that the Russians are a country or a government that we can work with now. Russia is a country that violates human rights, that spies and tries to influence our elections and other elections in other democracies. Russia is not going to be our partner, and whatever Donald Trump hopes to do with them, because maybe they gave him some money to bail him out when his casinos went bankrupt. I mean, I think that as this progresses over the course of the next couple of months and into next year, we will see a very clear pattern of Donald Trump trying to show favoritism to the Russians because the Russians helped bail out his
Forget
casino.
favoritism right now. Let's just see what happens with this sanctions bill if it lands on his desk. John Phillips, I cut you off. You get last word next time, my friend. This is day 180 on President Trump's administration. That's the State of America tonight. Check out the podcast, folks. You can get it at Apple Podcasts or your favorite app. We'll see you back here tomorrow.